Right, today we are undertaking a daunting task. Hi. Welcome to episode 1 of what I'm going to be calling the Roman Emperor Rundown. I have no idea if someone's already done something like this on YouTube. If you have, sorry, I couldn't find it. So let me explain and lay out some ground rules about what the hell's actually going on here. I have broken down the Roman imperial timeline into semi-digestible chunks. I mean, they're kind of already in funny wee groups. I've just sort of consolidated them. Each group of emperors will receive its own little video. Each video will contain a quick overview of each emperor, their life, the highs and lows, if they were a good ruler, if they were a bad ruler, all the important and interesting bits as deemed so by me. And by the end, if we make it to the end, we should have a post-match highlights reel of the entire Roman Empire in a playlist or something. If we make it that far. I am by no means a Roman Empire expert. Oh god, the thought actually makes me shudder! This is just a bit of fun, so Roman Empire bros who are out there, take a deep breath and relax. Go make a wee herbal tea for yourself, a cheeky wee herbal tea. Calm yourselves down before you march your little legions into my comment section to scream at me for leaving out your teeny tiny most niche favourite fact about Augustus. Thank you! Ideally, whatever this is, this series I guess, would go all the way up to Constantine. Haha! What a whimsical thought that is. To be honest, I'll be completely happy if I make it to Hadrian. I'll be buzzing if I can make it to Hadrian without losing the will to live, because she's already fleeting. So let's kick off the show with the OG5, the Julio-Claudians. Subscribe, by the way. Obviously, we're going to begin with the big lad who started it all. Gaius Octavian, born in 63 BC, although he's probably known better as Augustus. Octavian, Augustus, whatever you want to call him, was the nephew and adopted heir of Julius Caesar, who wasn't an emperor, by the way. Too many of you get that wrong. When Julius Caesar was assassinated on the Ides of March,
beware the Ides of March,
Augustus gained his power. I think he was about 18 or 19 at the time, which is a scary thought. Imagine 18-year-old me in charge of an empire? Ew! And Octavian's whole vibe when he rose into power was to sort of restore the Republic to its previous power. The Roman Republic being what Julius was in charge of, right? And after the turmoil, that's getting a whole separate video, not getting into that now, Jesus Christ. Augustus sought to restore this republic to sort of appease the old senators, because it was the senators who killed his uncle. So he didn't want to get on their bad side, clearly. And they granted him the title of Augustus and the power that comes along with it in 27 BC. You could say that Big Augie did a pretty good job at kicking off the empire. He brought a lot of peace and prosperity to the land after a big, huge period of instability in the changeover from republic to empire. He mostly done this through his massive reforms. He completely took Rome to the cleaners on that one. I'm very scared to get bogged down in these because we have another 4 emperors to get through after this, believe it or not. We're going to look at the sort of social and marriage reforms and religious reforms because those are the most interesting in my eyes, the ones that I actually read without going honk shoe, honk shoe. Augustus was a very old-fashioned values kind of guy, and he wanted to raise the standards of Rome because they'd gotten a little bit debaucherous. So first off, we have his marriage reforms. Way! Augustus made the crime of adultery a crime against the state, i.e. a crime against him, pretty much. And people found guilty of adultery were actually supposed to be executed. But his own daughter was one of the convicted. But instead of killing her, he actually had her exiled. But more on that later when we get to Tiberius, because he might have something to do with it too. He wanted to bring down the number of illegitimate children being born for, I think it's more for like tax reasons and stuff, and like inheritance things. Ugh. So he made marriage of a couple compulsory, and he made it much more difficult to get divorced, despite his own divorces in his time. But I mean, hey, he's the emperor, he can get away with doing what he wants. Unmarried men were taxed more the older that they got. Unmarried men also couldn't inherit any wealth from their families. Women with 3 or more kids could kick about Rome without needing a guardian, which was a big thing because as a woman in ancient Rome, women couldn't leave the house without having a male guardian with them. But if you could pop out 3 or more kids and live, you were allowed to kick about the streets by yourself. The legal age for a girl to become married is 12, which is wild, I know, but it's something to do with like fertility windows and stuff like that. He just wanted to basically make sure that people were getting married as quickly as possible and pumping out as many kids as they could. Once you were married, you had far more benefits than those who were unmarried, and the more kids you popped out, the more discounts you could get. It's all to do with money and inheritance of power and wealth and bringing up the legitimate birth rate. Don't know why he's obsessed with that. It's a bit creepy, to be honest. Among other things, right? That is not a concise list of absolutely every single marriage reform that he brought in. Again, it's a rundown. I'm giving you the highlights. That's the purpose of this. Some more of his other social reforms. Here we go. He established not the first fire force.
Hey, huh?
Fire brigade. Not the first fire brigade, but the most permanent and most efficient fire brigade that the city of Rome had at that point. And he ushered in this religious resurgence. He repaired religious buildings and monuments that had fallen into disrepair. He even built new ones, such as the Arapaxis, hello, the big huge one, and he became what is known as Pontifex Maximus, which basically means that he's not only in charge of the entire empire, but also the entire church. So he's also in charge of the religion of the state. Good for him. Thus, he started what is known as the Pax Romana, Roman peace, which is essentially a golden age where Rome flourished, and it lasted about 200 years, kicked off with Augustus, and was finished with Marcus Aurelius. Everyone's favourite. Everybody goes on about Marcus Aurelius for some reason. Anyway, Augustus died in 14 CE in southern Italy. It's thought that his wife Livia possibly poisoned him. Not in a murdery way though, it was more of an assisted sewer slide kind of way in his final days. Or perhaps a huge power play to get him out the way so that Tiberius could rise to power a bit quicker. Who knows? We're not going to know. But Augustus's power was pretty much peacefully handed over to Tiberius, son of his second wife, Livia, the one who maybe poisoned him, his stepson and adopted heir. His body was brought back to Rome and put in his massive mausoleum, and upon his death he was announced a god, which again kicks off this whole new craze of the people worshipping the emperor as a god. How up yourself do you have to be to die and then be like, oh my god, you were so good, we're gonna worship you like a god? I'd get the cringe. I would. So that's Augustus away. He was the first emperor, but also he's considered to be one of the greatest, and sort of set an example for the rest to try and mostly fail to emulate in their empirical endeavours. I don't know if that's the correct word for that or not. Anyway, he's dead. Now it's time for Tiberius to take his shot. Oh, Tiberius. I feel sorry for him, I really do. Tiberius was born on the 16th of November, 42 BC. He was born to Tiberius Claudius Nero, who he was named after, and Livia Drusilla, his mum. However, when he was quite young, Augustus stepped in and forced his parents to divorce so he could marry Livia. He had a great military career before and during his reign, but I am not getting into that because I hate military history. 'Tis a big part of history, but it's a part that I like to talk about as little as possible. But he also had a lot of heartbreak in his life. He was very close with his brother Drusus, who unfortunately fell off his horse and died, and Tiberius was very upset by this, and he pure walked his coffin back to Rome and all that, all very dramatic. But there's more than that too. He was married to a lovely woman called Vipsania, however you want to pronounce it. And it seemed like they two actually loved each other, despite most people in ancient Rome getting married for like money or wealth or status and that sort of thing. It was much more of a practical measure rather than love. Love was a very peasanty thing. But it seems like these two actually did love each other. Then, lovely Augustus once again stepped in and forced them to split because his daughter Julia was widowed for the second time, and she needed another husband. The same Julia from before, who was a little bit of a slag.
I became a total slag.
I really don't think they were a happy couple. There was rumours she was up to her old habits very, very early on in their relationship, but there was nothing fully concrete. Oh, Roman concrete, haha. There's a joke in there somewhere, but I am not bothered about making it. And Livia, her mother-in-law, really wasn't keen on her at all. Tiberius eventually got a job on Rhodes, so he just left her. He left her in Rome with his mum and Augustus, and he went to Rhodes to do his little thing. He was very weird during his time on Rhodes. He became quite a recluse, just being a weird guy, right? Tiberius was a bit of a weirdo.
I'm weird. I'm a weirdo.
So while Tiberius is away in Rhodes, being a weirdo, Livia is in Rome with Augustus and Julia, doing some scheming, working behind the scenes.
Hustling behind the scenes.
And she exposed Julia's now crimes, full-on crimes, to her dad. She collected evidence against her that she was cheating on old Tiberius and confronted Augustus about it. Cringe, 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 cringe. Heartbroken, Augustus knew that the full-on crime for adultery was execution, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Because that's his daughter, that's his baby girl. So instead, he exiled her to her own private island, her own private Italian island by the name of Pandateria, which I believe is the modern day Ventotene. I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing those wrong. Oh, the horror. Oh God, she's committed a crime and she gets her own private island. The 17th of September, 14 CE, AD, doesn't matter. Tiberius succeeded Augustus. Because Augustus was dead. But Augustus wasn't actually that keen on Tiberius. Tiberius is the least problematic one of the group. And Tiberius is like 54 when he succeeds the throne. So already the first two emperors are coming from very different backgrounds, if you will. Augustus is handed a republic in pieces, which he turns into an empire at 18 or 19. Tiberius, being much older, at 54 or whatever, is handed pretty stable empire that's already been, put onto its feet. And to be honest, he really doesn't do much with it. To describe his reign in one sentence, I would say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, Johnny. He really doesn't push the boat out very far. He doesn't really bring in any new major changes. He just kind of leaves what Augustus gave him, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it, Johnny. He continued to have more military success and navy success? No one ever talks about the Roman navy. But either way, I still don't care. One major thing about Tiberius is that he was very good with his cash. He reportedly grew the treasury to like 20 times the size of what Augustus originally left him. Part of this was through his use of the delatores and the practice of deliation. I nearly said delegation, I thought that's not right. Deliation. I'm unsure if he introduced this entire practice or if it was already in place and he just cranked the dial up to 100 on it. Roman citizens who broke the law were punished by heavy, heavy fines that were issued or confiscations and repossessions of their stuff to pay said fines. Basically the pilot for can't pay, we'll take it away. Any citizen, not just anyone, could volunteer to become a delator, who were the people who went round to collect said fines and do the repossessing, right? There was a lot of abuse of that system, whether it was somebody feeling particularly greedy or jealous of a neighbour, if you didn't like someone, if you wanted something that they had, you could point the finger and pretty much get away with taking their stuff. As well, wealthy people who committed crimes just would pay them. They would just continue to commit crimes and pay to do it. The punishment wasn't a deterrent for the rich. So as you can imagine, the lower classes suffered much more. This is groundbreaking stuff, isn't it, guys? Either way, our Tiberius ended up sitting on a big mound of cash because of it. Then in 23 BCE, more tragedy struck. Poor Tiberius can't catch a break. Break like his brother's leg, more like, game on. Did I mention that? His brother's leg broke and then he died from it when he fell off his horse. Silly sausage. His son, also called Drusus, probably named after that brother, I'd imagine, died. This sent Tiberius on a spiral. So Tiberius fled to Capri and he left Sejanus in charge of everything. Sejanus was the head of the Praetorian Guard, and the Praetorian Guard were essentially the emperor's bodyguards. And Tiberius once again became a recluse in his estate. Wasn't having it, he was done, he was all gamed out. There was a rumour that Sejanus had seduced the wife of dead Drusus, not the brother, the son. Livilla, her name was, I believe. And the pair, both of them, conspired together to poison Drusus so that Sejanus could get more power. Tiberius was already a wee bit paranoid that his son's death wasn't of natural causes and was of something like a poisoning. So when he got wind of these rumours about Livilla and Sejanus, he doubled down. He got his delatores, the ones that go round, can't pay, we'll take it away, boys, to torture people for information about his son's potential murder. Naturally, as rumours do, it grew arms and legs. Especially when you're torturing people for information, they're going to just say anything to make it end. After all of his military success, the public were quite fond of Tiberius, but this is a point where he's already been a bit weird when he went off to Rhodes, so people are like, okay, he's a bit of a weirdo, but I'm fine. And then when he fled to Capri, all these rumours about him torturing people and having dungeons in his estate and all that really grew, and people really thought he was a right creepy weirdo. Whether truthful or not, these rumours, we cannot confirm or deny. But Tiberius had made up his mind. Upon his 5th election as consul, he came back to Rome. He appointed Sejanus as his co-consul, giving him even more power than he had before. Don't worry, There's a method to his madness. He made a big show out of him. He made his birthday like a bank holiday in Rome. He had statues erected to him. He was pure showering him with all this lavish gold, riches, jewels, whatever. And then he got another member of the Praetorian Guard to execute him. The entire story of Just Sejanus is absolutely mental. So if you'd like a video on that, I will happily do one. But hey, he wasn't an emperor. So that's the only mention he's getting in this video. So with his son's potential murderer dead, don't know what happened to the wife, by the way, once again arose the issue of succession. Same thing as before. Tiberius had to pick the best out of a bad bunch. And Jesus Christ, this lot must have been bad. He picked a lad called Gaius Caesar, son of Agrippina, who was the daughter of Julia the Elder, our girl Julia from before, making this Gaius Caesar boy the great-grandson of Augustus. And this Gaius Caesar is much, much more better known as Caligula. Tiberius knew that he picked a wrong'un. There just really wasn't much he could do about it because, again, best of a bad bunch. And a very, very strange handover of power. Tiberius is at some sort of festival games and he puts his shoulder out, right? So badly that he ends up in a coma. I mean, he is an old man by this point. Folk thought that he was going to die. So the Praetorian Guard is handed over to Caligula. So the power's been handed over. Tiberius is still in his bed. When Tiberius wakes up, one of the members of the Praetorian Guard suffocates him in his own bed sheets. There's no such thing as a happy retirement for Roman emperors, except for maybe like one. Overall, Tiberius left the empire in pretty good nick, to be honest. Probably to the detriment of his own mental health by the sounds of things. But did he ruin it all by choosing Caligula? Are we ready for the first official Mado of the Roman Emperor rundown? I don't think you are. Welcome in Caligula, who you might actually recognise from the glory days of TotallyLooksLike.com. Caligula's reign was a very short and sweet one, and the sources for it are a wee bit iffy. Folk in scholarship tend to look to Tacitus and his annals for information about the Julio-Claudians, right? He's a very good, trustworthy writer. But funnily enough, his books on Caligula are missing. All of them. The only mentions of Caligula in Tacitus's work that we have surviving are actually little excerpts from when he's talking about Tiberius. So it's all in relation to Tiberius. It's not actually about Caligula himself. So we have to construct the rest of his narrative from less trustworthy sources. So just keep that in mind, that a lot of this has to be taken with a heap of salt, not even a pinch. His full name was Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, but he was nicknamed Caligula by his dad's troops. Caligula means little boots. Do with that information what you will. Caligula succeeded Tiberius at the age of 24. That's the same age as me right now. Can you imagine putting an empire on me right now? Oh, no thank you, no thank you. There's a very big difference between Caligula at the start of his reign and Caligula at the end of his reign, and I'm going to tell you for why right now. About 6 to 8 months into Caligula's reign, he got sick. It's possible that he had a full-on mental breakdown. Get an empire dumped on you at our age of 24. Dare I say it, I'm sympathising with the boy. This mental stress possibly kicked off a glandular dysfunction, which in turn changed his entire personality and behaviour. I've linked below Robert Katz's paper, The Illness of Caligula. I highly recommend that you go and read it because it does a much better job at explaining the ins and outs of the illness than I do. Linked below with all my other bibliography as well, by the way, as I always do for every single video. The main takeaway though is that Caligula's personality seemed to do a complete 180 after he had this possible mental breakdown. Pre-sickness, we can actually corroborate with Tacitus how he behaved. And by the sounds of things, Caligula started off as like a quiet, shy and very anxious person. Post-sickness, he becomes a megalomaniac. He's completely selfish, power-hungry. He's a big show-off, just chucks money away. He's cruel and rude. So for a wee laugh, I'm going to give you a little list of the things that he reportedly did when in this new altered mental state, right? But remember, Romans loved a rumour, so we don't actually know the exact levels of truth behind these things, right? This is just what the people were saying about him. You be the judge. I am merely passing on the information to you. Remember all that money that Tiberius saved up? He got rid of the lot. He had extravagant parties and extravagant games and festivals, which is why the public loved him so much, because he was like chucking the money at their entertainment. And then when he realised, oh, I've not got any money left here, he extorted the rich citizens of Rome, taking their houses off them and other things to get the money back. Bit weird, not usually the way an emperor would go. He was the mentally ill Robin Hood. Oh, I just came up with that now. That was cute. He allegedly wanted to elect his horse as consul to be part of the Senate. Yet another emperor taking the mick out of the Senate. They used not learn anything from each other. He wanted to be worshipped like a god in life. If you remember when Augustus died, he was made a god in his death. Tiberius refused to be made into a god upon his death. Caligula wants it when he's alive. He also had 3 loving sisters who he perhaps loved a little bit too much, if you catch my drift. He did have a little bit of military success in his time, but even that tiny bit of success is thought to have been a setup. He had a military triumph in Germany. Following, but it's possible that the opposing army was a band of slaves that he took with him to slaughter, to pretend that he had a military victory because he couldn't be bothered actually finding an army to fight. And my favourite of them all, he planned an invasion of Britain. He marched his army from Rome all the way through Gaul, right to the beach of the Channel. But he was so close. He was so close to getting across here. And as they approached the beach, he went, oh, sod it. Just collect some seashells, guys. He had his army stop and collect seashells and then go home. What a waste of time. He just couldn't be bothered crossing the water. So I'm going to leave those with you. You can make up your own mind on those facts. Feel free to check the bibliography and dive deeper into them if you want. Have a wee giggle, and I'm going to tell you how he died. On the 24th of January, AD 41, Caligula was assassinated. By who? You guessed it. The Praetorian Guard. They saw that Caligula was becoming a bit of a liability and, extorting the rich, treating the poor to all these fancy things. Can't he have that? Marching us all the way to Gaul and then turning back. Can't he have that? Liability. Spoiler, by the way. The Praetorian Guard have a little trend going on where they start to take matters into their own hands concerning who's actually in power. And it just gets worse as the empire goes on, to be fair. They also hunted down and killed his wife Caesonia and daughter Julia, which is a bit much, actually. Could have left them alone. So his reign was too short and not very sweet after all. Since he was young and in his prime and completely up himself, right, he didn't consider succession. Plus he was assassinated, so anybody that he had probably picked out to be his successor would have also got assassinated. They killed his daughter, come on! How the power was handed over and to whom might surprise you and give you a wee chuckle. If there's anything to take away from this video, it's that you've had a wee chuckle. Right? Came on, big cowardly Claudius, as I like to remember him. Claudius succeeded Caligula. There you go. There you have it. He was born on the 1st of August, 10 BCE. I filmed this over multiple days now and I can't remember if I'm saying AD, BC, CE or BCE. I'm so sorry if I'm jumping between them all. It's been weeks. He's the grandson of Augustus, the nephew of Tiberius, and the uncle of Caligula. But for the most part, Claudius was left on his Todd. He was disabled as far as we can tell. He had a very obvious limp, a speech impediment. Speech impediment! I'm Scottish! And was possibly also partially deaf. He was also considered to be a fairly unattractive and clumsy guy on top of that. Because of that, his family never even bothered to consider him for ruling the empire. They thought he was a bit of a letdown, so they just left him by himself, which is a wee shame, really. But I need to stop feeling sorry for Roman emperors, because they were Roman emperors. He got really close with a historian known as Livy, and it was Livy who possibly got him into doing his own sort of studies and writings and things, because Claudius wrote a lot of literature about a whole bunch of different things. But it's all lost to time now. We know that he wrote things about things, but we don't know the exact words that he wrote about them. Did that make sense? After Caligula's assassination, Claudius was found cowering behind a curtain in the imperial palace and was found by a member of the Praetorian Guard, hence why I call him Cowardly Claudius. Hello. When the Praetorian Guard found him, they proclaimed him emperor. On the spot. We don't really know why. It could possibly be because he was the only living member of the Julio-Claudian family left that was like an adult male at the time, so they maybe just thought, there's no one else left, let's just take him. We also don't know for sure if maybe he had a hand in the death of Caligula, or if it was just right place, right time, stroke of luck. So the Praetorian Guard picked him, but the Senate didn't vibe with him at all, and they pushed back on this choice for 2-3 days before they just gave in. And he changed some stuff up when he got into power. Claudius assigned his own council made up of non-Roman freedmen, which really... we really got on the wrong side of the Senate with that one, because they were also of a lower social status, and obviously the Senate were like, what? Not Romans, not citizens, not elite, not us? How dare you? He also reorganised the annona, which was the grain dole given out to citizens. He never established it. It was established by the Gracchi brothers during the Republic, but it had been sort of failing, so he gave it a little a little revamp. And he expanded the empire quite a bit into Turkey, the Balkans, North Africa, and Britain. Claudius was the emperor responsible for finally bringing in the province of Britannia to the Roman Empire. He launched his campaign in AD 43, and before Roman arrival, Britain was sort of little tribes with no centralised form of power. They were all self-governing little tribes. And Claudius had no military experience, so he really needed to get something under his belt that would really solidify his position and gain him that military respect. So he sent the men ahead first, and Claudius didn't join them until their landing was confirmed successful and they were, there. We aren't really sure the exact route that they took, but they probably left from Boulogne and landed in either Chichester or Richborough. Richborough. Whatever route they took, doesn't really matter, because once they landed, they marched onwards to Colchester. Cassius Dio says that Claudius arrived with war elephants. Huh? Hey. Huh? The sources for his arrival are a wee bit iffy, if you can't imagine. Maybe he genuinely did. Maybe he wanted his Hannibal Barca moment, and Slay Queen, love that for you. With or without the elephants, Claudius personally arrived and captured Colchester and established it as the capital of his Britain. He built a temple to himself on site, and he left behind a little colony of soldiers to literally hold down the fort and further venture and explore into England. Supposedly 11 of the tribes that were already there surrendered to him and became his client kings. But in general there was a lot of unrest, a lot of pushback. The best known client king was Prasutagus, who's mostly famous for being the husband of Boudica. I absolutely adore Boudica, and I'm really, really upset that I can't talk about her more in this video, but she's not a Roman emperor, unfortunately. So with Colchester established, Claudius boosted back to Rome after give or take 2 weeks of being in Britain. He was rewarded with a military triumph, 2 arches were made in his name, there was big parties and festivals and all that good stuff, and he was given the honorary title of Britannicus. But he never really used it, but he did name his son that, his son to his wife Messalina. He had 2 kids with Messalina, Britannicus and Octavia. But in AD 48, she embarrassed him by getting publicly married to her lover. Claudius was made to look like a right fool. A right silly old fool. So what did he do? He had them both executed. As you do. And, well, upholding Augustan law, really, if that was still in place by then. I don't know. Haven't looked into that. Don't really care that much. The law that Augustus couldn't even uphold himself for his own daughter. Anyway, so later on he found a new wife, and a lady called Agrippina the Younger. I know that for the lassies they reuse all the same names. I'm really sorry about that. But you'll have to take it up with him. Agrippina the Younger, who was his niece, by the way. Oh, no, 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 no! And at this point, marrying your niece was against the law. But he changed it, because he's the emperor! Once married, Agrippina convinced Claudius to adopt her son, which is kind of the least he can do after marrying his niece, the dirty old fool. Her son being Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus. See, if I take my time I can pronounce things alright. Claudius died on the 13th of October, AD 54. Possibly poisoned by Agrippina, or on her orders, whatever, so that her son, her now adopted by Claudius son, could take power over Claudius's naturally born son, Britannicus. There was lots of literature written about him when he died, of writers mocking him and saying, oh, I never liked him from the beginning, which they didn't say when he was alive, by the way, because they probably would have got killed. They basically blamed any mistakes that he had made during his reign, or failures that he had whilst in power, on his aforementioned disabilities, for one, rude, cruel, or his non-Roman, lower-class freedman council, because God forbid the lower classes have power to do anything, Or even worse, his wife! His wife having a say in political matters. No way, you can't have that! You can't have a woman! But it doesn't matter anyway, because Agrippina got what she wanted in the end, and her son got the throne. Her son took power. Sorry, Britannicus. Nero is now in charge. Final one, here we go. It's Neckbeard Nero, another certified Mado of the Roman Emperor rundown. Nero was born on the 15th of December, AD 37, so his birthday's just passed. Oh, bless him. His dad died, and his mum was exiled when he was really wee, which meant that all their property and wealth and all that was confiscated. When Agrippina married Claudius, he gave all that back. They got all their inheritance back, and Claudius became an even more legitimate ruler because Agrippina and Nero are 2 direct descendants of Augustus. As we previously discussed, Agrippina probably had Claudius poisoned so that Nero could take the throne over Britannicus. But he got power when he was 16. Cringe. Oh my god. And once he got power, he poisoned Britannicus for good measure, just to make sure he wasn't going to try and usurp what was usurped from him. Kind of. The sources, of course, for Nero's Rome are a little bit iffy. Sorry to sound like a broken record, by the way. Especially with Nero, there's a lot of historical propaganda to wade through, because a lot of the writers that we have for him are writing a lot later in time, and they didn't like him. But in terms of gaining that power, it seems like nobody had an issue with Nero getting power at the time. He was fairly legitimate through his connections to Claudius and Augustus, hello. But also the Senate quite liked him, and the military quite liked him. So he's got all the big powers on his side. In the first few years of his rule, his mum actually held a lot of the power too. He was a wee bit of a mummy's boy at the start. For a woman, a lot of power for a woman at that time. To the point where she even appeared on coinage alongside Nero, which is a big no-no. That's a big... Oh, don't know how she managed that one. Until he turned 21 and he had her killed. Of course. There's loads of stories around her death as well, part of that sort of propaganda and dramatisation of the lives of the emperors, right? What we do know for certain is that she was plotting against him, and once he found out, he started plotting against her. So she might have even took her own life to avoid whatever punishment she would have got from plotting against him in the first place. In my head, she gives me, like, what's her name? The mum out of Peaky Blinders. She gives her vibes. But Mama wasn't the only influential woman in his life. Oh no. Nero was married a total of 3 times. Firstly, he was married to Octavia, who was the daughter of Claudius. Haha. Married his technical adopted sister. A little bit weird. They were married before he even became emperor. She was like 13 and he was 15, I believe. It was completely for legitimacy purposes. Was not a happy marriage at all. He was constantly at the ham, constantly fornicating with other women, especially one called Poppaea. He was so in love with Poppaea, properly obsessed with her, that he divorced Octavia and then married Poppaea. But also executed Octavia in the process. For doing what? Just being a lassie. Just being a lassie, really. Which actually caused some strife in the public eye. The public really liked Octavia, so him having her killed started this whole big bit of strife and really soured their opinion towards him. Oh my god, doesn't that narrative sound a wee bit familiar? Oh. Anyway, he marries Poppaea after Octavia's away, and he's obsessed with her. To the point where people are like, he doesn't even care about being emperor, he's so obsessed with this woman. So he's obsessed with her, aye. Then in AD 65, he kicks her to death in a fit of rage, possibly while she's pregnant. We don't know the exact accuracy behind that. Again, people didn't like him, so they were spinning all sorts of wee fabrications. But if he's done that, that's really bad. She might have had some sort of childbirth complications or other sort of pregnancy complications that have killed her. However she died though, whether it was by his hand or not, she was given a public funeral and she was actually deified, whether he's kicked her to death or not. It's kind of giving, if I can't have you, no one can. One of the earliest iterations that we know of, if I can't have you, no one can. And after Poppaea came Statilia Messalina, who Nero married after he had her first husband executed. What a catch, isn't he? Isn't he great? Whilst all this is going on in his love life and all these wife swaps are going on, he also has a lot of strife to deal with actually in the empire. You know, he has to pay attention, a little bit of attention to it at least. Firstly, we're bringing it back to Boudica, baby. Did you think I was done? Nero was in charge of the empire when Boudica led her revolt in AD 60 to 61. Her and her reasons for her revolt are getting their whole separate video for another time, but the main thing that you need to be aware of is that she completely destroyed St Albans, Colchester, which was the city set up by Claudius, said earlier, and Londinium before the Romans managed to stop her. And even then, they didn't finish her off. She might have died by her own hand just to say, haha, up here's Rome, you're not killing me today. And that is honestly the biggest slay of a lifetime. I love her. Nero replaced the governor of Britain and tightened up all the rules to make sure nobody like that came up again. But hey, didn't really work. He also had to tackle revolts going on in Judea as well, and all these little pockets of rebellion that started to sprout up the longer his reign went on. And of course we can't talk about Nero without talking about the Great Fire of Rome. Everyone in their dug has heard of the story of Nero singing and dancing whilst the city of Rome burns, and apparently he started it. This is probably entirely propaganda. We are not immune. The Great Fire of Rome started on the 19th of July in AD 94. 94? 64. 64, Christ. And it completely decimated 3 whole districts of the city. Folk blamed Nero for it and said he was mad. He started the fire because he wanted to reclaim the land to build his new palace on it. And to be fair, he did claim land to build his new house on. but I don't think he started the fire. I think that's going a bit too far. This is where Tacitus comes in, by the way, because he was actually alive at this time, though he was very, very young. And in Tacitus's account, he says that Nero was out of the city at the time when the fire started, so he couldn't have started it himself. But he came back to the city to help the firefight, to help rebuild homes and rebuild the destroyed districts. I feel like I'm talking about the Hunger Games, because I'm saying districts and capital and whoa. But he also put in place a plan to help rehouse the people whose homes had been destroyed in the Inferno, which directly contradicts this singing and dancing mental narrative that is sadly the more popular known one. But yet he did actually, in the process, take a bit of the land to build his golden house on, his golden palace, which I think the Dying Gaul was in for a wee bit. I can't remember. I might be misremembering that, but if you watch my Dying Gaul video, I'm sure I say it in there. I think I'm right. Nero blamed a small, quirky, niche little religious group for starting the fire, called the Christians, which eventually led down this path of his persecution of them. However, it is currently Christmas time. I'm actually filming this bit on Christmas Eve, so I don't really fancy diving into the ins and outs of Nero's Christian persecutions that day. Thank you very much. Anyways, in AD 68, public, military and political opinion of Nero was souring by the second. There was rebellions popping up here, there and everywhere across the empire, not just in the city but Gaul, Spain, you name it. The public were incredibly angry because their food supply had been cut off. There was a rebellion general who cut off the grain supply coming in from Egypt to the capital. The grain supply from Egypt being one of the primary sources of food and sustainability for the capital. So obviously people were angry. People were hungry, people were dying, and they blamed Nero for it. And amongst all this, massive military support was grown for a guy called Galba, who we will be coming back to in future episodes of the Roman Emperor Rundown. Nero was declared an enemy of the state by the Senate, because folks still kinda listen to them sometimes about some things. Like this. And he had to flee Rome. He had to run. He had to flee, he had to go. He eventually had to commit a suicide. He had to kill himself. He was given an expensive public funeral, and then he got damnatio memoriae. I need to do a whole video on that phenomenon itself, but too long, didn't read. It was the process of like the damnation of the memory, pretty much, where if somebody was considered a baddie in the Roman Empire, their face would be chipped out of statues and mosaics, or the statue heads would be cut off, their names were chipped out of inscriptions and all that sort of thing. Basically just trying to erase that person's image and name from history. But also it didn't kind of work because we still know that Nero existed, so it didn't quite have the effect that they wanted it to have. But there you go, you get what I mean. Thus bringing about an end to the Julio-Claudian dynasty. That's it. He's the last one. And this plunges the rule of the empire into a complete spiral. But we'll be discussing all that next time. Oh, we did it! We finally did it! That is the last of the Julio-Claudians away! God, that took so much longer and so much more effort than I ever intended it to. My apologies. Sorry! Tune in next time for episode 2, The Year of the Four Emperors. Oh, good grief. Not next week though. Jesus Christ, I need a break for these boys. I need to go back to something not Roman, please, God. And thank you all for 1,000 subscribers. We did it before the end of the year, besties. Thank you so much for all your support. I think we're sitting at 1,028 as of the time of recording. Thank you so much. Thanks for keeping the dream alive, baby. Leave us a like if you enjoyed it. If you didn't enjoy it, leave me a pity like anyway, because this was a lot of effort and a lot of strife. And I think I deserve it, actually. And subscribe as well while you're at it. Next year, 2000, baby, let's go. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to those who are watching it if I get this video out on time before Christmas or New Year. Haha, that's funny. Christmas is tomorrow. And if you don't celebrate, I hope you have a good day anyway. Or if it's a different time of year, Merry Christmas for the next one coming. Have fun. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next Tuesday. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. I'll see you next year. God. Bye.